Hello, grandkids. Glad you can make it. My name is Nyla, your resident grandkid host, and welcome to the Grandpod. Now, as you may have been able to tell by either the title or if you're watching by the video, there's something a little bit different. I don't have my super special guest, and it might have a slightly different title than the previous episodes, and that is because this is the first episode, the very first installment of our show within a show. Within this show within a show, I, Nyla, your resident grandkid host, will be taking a deeper look into the songs that we know and love, trying to answer questions either I have or that the grandkids submit about different lyrics, songs, about entire albums and EPs, and about this entire grandson musical universe that we all are a part of and like so much, you know? It's gonna be really fun. I'm very excited for it, and I hope that this is somehow entertaining. I like analyzing things a lot, um, and I felt like making a series about this in podcast form is a way for me to be able to kind of get this out of my system. And I will be calling this series, drum roll please. I'm not adding a drum roll sound. I'm just gonna do a mouth. This series will be called Over-Granalyzed. Thank you. Yes, I enjoy your applause. Thank you. I live for the applause. So, for this first episode of Over-Granalyzed, I will be diving into one of my favorite songs from Death of an Optimist, and that is the outro, Welcome to Paradise. I've been in love with that song since I first heard it, and I also have been sitting on this very question that I want to answer in this episode since 2 days after Death of an Optimist came out. You heard that right, folks. I've been sitting on this question since December 6th, 2020, and I get to explore the various options that I found in this year and some change today with you guys, and it's gonna be fun. The question that I am seeking to answer in this very first bonus episode of the podcast is related to the very first line of the song, or at least the first couple of lines. And those are as follows: You ain't gotta hurt no more. Didn't you hear the war's over? Just don't look behind that door. You don't want to get that much closer. Take my hand and join me as we venture into paradise to find out what's behind the door. Okay, so to answer this question, I've come up with three options of what I believe could be behind the door. Technically, there's four, but I didn't like the fourth one, so I'm cutting that one out, and I'm only gonna do three. Okay? Cool. So, option number one for what I believe could be behind the door is all of the pain and suffering left behind by the war. Okay, that's like a really heavy one to start with, but we do have a couple of clues that lead to this answer. So, first thing that's kind of the most obvious is the line that comes before the just don't look behind that door line, which is, didn't you hear the war's over? That directly connects the war to the door. Not just because they kind of rhyme, but because they're literally like back to back lines. So I don't think it's too far fetched to assume that they are in some way connected. Now, another thing that kind of hammers this point home for me a little bit is the fact that World War III is a song on the album that comes just a few songs before the outro. World War III, skip, song. Didn't you hear the war's over? Kinda. Are you picking up what I'm putting down? Now I'm going to explain all of the moving parts. So, one thing that I feel like is very important in all of these options that I'm going to give you is me telling you who is saying this line to our protagonist, to G. Who is telling G to not look behind the door? In this specific scenario, I believe it is some person in power in the US government or the government themselves as like this big entity telling G and possibly other people who also fought in the war to not look behind the door. I'm gonna kind of go into a bit more of a narrative now, a kind of story that I have pieced together with this option. And that is that the reason why this government official or the US government wouldn't want G to look behind the door and see all of this destruction and chaos that was left behind by the war that he fought in is because it would diminish what little pride he has within his country. We go through World War III and we kind of explore the internal struggle that G goes through, where he's like, I don't know whether I'm good or bad. I understand that I'm fighting this war, but I don't really know what I'm fighting for. I don't really know what my purpose in this is. And then we kind of see the aftermath of his journey, in which he has PTSD and he's angry all the time and all of that. We kind of see his aftermath, but we don't see the aftermath of what happens in the country that he fights in, right? We don't ever get to see that. And he was already on the fence. He really, there's even the line, am I a good guy? Am I a villain in World War III? He doesn't really know. And if he were to look behind the door, he would officially know, like, oh, okay, I am the villain. I see all of the hurt and pain that I've caused. I've already seen it on the battlefield, but I haven't seen it after the war is over. And if he were to see it now, he would truly understand his actions and what they have done, what he has contributed to, how he was used by the government as this pawn in this giant game of chess that nobody really wins. Because the government is the one telling him not to look behind the door, they're also the one welcoming him to paradise. And that paradise is what they're selling. They're selling him this idea of patriotism and being proud of your country, being proud to be a part of your country. They are trying to say that having that sense of pride, being able to celebrate this victory that they have under their belt, is the actual paradise. They're trying to sell this idea of willful ignorance that, like, if you don't know what's behind that door, it's better for you. Because you can live in this sense of pride in your country. Because in this scenario, to the government in this universe, ignorance is bliss. Within this ignorance, the sun will always shine. So that's option one. I have two more of what it could be, but that's just the first one I wanted to introduce, kind of get your brain churning on some things. So let's move on to option number two. Option number two for what could be behind the door is the outside world. Now you may be asking, okay, well, who is telling G not to look behind the door in this scenario? Well, for this one, it is X, our main antagonist for this album. In this scenario, I believe that X is trying to demonize the outside world, the world that is outside of the door, in order to get him to isolate himself and make him more susceptible to X's control. X understands that G is in a very vulnerable position. G is in an especially vulnerable position because of the war that is mentioned in the line before the door line, and because of World War III, which takes place only a few songs before Welcome to Paradise. In World War III, we know that G fought in this war. But if he fought in this war, then why would X have to let him know that the war is over? I believe that the reason why X is saying, didn't you hear the war's over? And the reason why G doesn't already know this is because G was discharged early for having such severe PTSD. This idea makes the line, didn't you hear the war's over, just that much more sinister because X knows how much the war has impacted G. He knows how badly it has affected him and impacted him. And trying to use that as a, hey, the war's over now. You're okay in here, right? Like the war ended while you were with me, while we were in here. Trying to make him feel a sense of comfort. X does not want G to look behind the door because he realizes that if he goes into the outside world, if he sees that the outside world isn't as scary as his mind has made it to be, he may get past X. And X, obviously, wants to stay around because we know X's true intentions. We know who X is. We know that X saying, "You ain't gotta hurt," and "the war is over," is a manipulation tactic. He's not actually trying to comfort G. In fact, he's actually starting a war with G of his own, and that war will continue to rage on if X is able to successfully isolate G from the outside world. This is X's plan to officially kill the Optimist for good. Okay, that one was kind of sad. That one was kind of depressing. I know. But it's my option number two, and I think it kind of makes sense when you piece two and two together. I know option number two was a bit on the depressing side, but option number three is actually much, much more positive. So we're gonna move on and end this on a high note. Okay, so my option number three for what could be behind the door is X. And you have to hear me out on this. So the song that comes before Welcome to Paradise in the album is Drop Dead, which is also another one of my favorites. In Drop Dead, we hear these more inspirational lines, like "I'd rather drop dead than be a quitter," and "Don't let go, don't give up that easy," and "It's turning around." These are moments of optimism for a time in G's life where he hasn't seen that optimism in a very long time. We finally see things turn around for G. I feel like this is a step towards him being able to compartmentalize his negative emotions, be able to come to grips with himself, with the issues that he faces, and to finally be able to successfully lock X away in a part of his brain. X is never really gone, though. These thoughts are never really gone for him. As long as he doesn't open that door, he's going to be great. He's in paradise. Now that he's finally been able to control his negative emotions, his negative impulses, he can finally feel what it is to be happy. He can finally enjoy paradise. Here in his room, the sun always shines with positivity. He doesn't have to constantly believe that everything is out to get him anymore. He doesn't have to go by these narratives that X has been trying to feed him, like the ones that we see in the Ballad of G and X. He's freed from that, as long as he doesn't look behind the door. Alright, so those are my three options for what I believe could be behind the door. If you want to join in the conversation, go ahead and tag the Grandpod. Let me know what you think could be an option. Let me know if you agree with anything, if you disagree. I'd also love to have a discussion about that. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope it wasn't like boring or anything. I just really like analyzing things and songs. And I hope that this was able to give you kind of a feel of what I'm going for with this series. But yeah, thank you for listening. Especially if you listened this far, oh my gosh, thank you. And I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope it wasn't boring. And I hope I did okay. And yeah. This has been Over-Granalyzed. My name is Nyla, and I think that's it. Hope you have a good day.